Hi, today's recording will be about stem cell regeneration, which is essentially the process of regrowing something. So before we start talking about our topic, here are some things that grow back after they're cut. So for example, if you cut your hair or your nails, they'll grow back over time. And if you get a paper cut, your cut will heal because your skin cells will grow back. Some things that don't grow back include larger body parts. For example, your eye can't grow back. That's why pirates have eye patches. And also your head, your leg, your arms, your foot, and your hand also can't grow back. There is a type of worm known as planaria, which is able to grow back even after it's been cut. Here you can see that if you cut the planaria in half, after about 14 days, the parts of their bodies that were cut off will regrow and will end up with two worms. And this process is called regeneration, which is when a living organism regrows new tissue to replace lost or injured tissue. And previous studies show that the worm can be cut into pieces that are as small as 1/279th of the original worm, and the worm will still grow back into a complete form in a few weeks. And you can essentially cut the worm into 279 equal parts, and they'll grow back into 279 distinct and complete worms. So you might be wondering how these worms can regrow their bodies. If we were cut in half, I don't think we could regrow our other half and end up with two copies of ourselves. And if we were cut into 279 pieces, we definitely would not grow back into 279 copies of ourselves. So the reason why planarian have this amazing ability is because they have a large proportion of stem cells. In fact, 20% of their bodies contain stem cells, which are cells that are able to turn into many different types of cells. So if you're missing a certain type of cell, a stem cell can grow into that type of cell and replace it. So for example, in order to grow back its body, a planaria needs to grow back many types of cells, which include its brain cells, cells in its nervous system, its intestines, its skin, muscles, and more. And it doesn't have those cells in its body after it's been cut off. Like if you cut off the upper portion of the planaria, it won't have the brain cells to help it regrow its brain. So the stem cells in its body can turn into these different types of cells to help it grow back. And the more specific term for adult stem cells in these planaria are called neoblasts. So humans have stem cells too, but we don't have a large proportion when compared to planaria. We only have stem cells in certain parts of our body, and these include stem cells that are located in the embryo, the brain, the blood, the bone marrow, in the muscle, the skin, the heart, and also the liver. So our volunteers will go deeper into these specific types of stem cells.
The embryo is what you are when you are first being created while inside your mother. During this phase, the zygote, or the first cell you become, begins this process called mitosis. Mitosis is what happens when your cells divide themselves and produce an exact copy. After splitting multiple times, two types of cells appear: the outer cells, called the trophoblasts, and the inner cells, called the embryoblasts. This big round clump of cells is called the blastocyst. The embryonic stem cells can be found in the inner cells and are able to copy themselves, which is something like if you were to make an identical twin. Had some missing nerve cells, then the embryonic stem cells could come right along and transform into a nerve cell and replace it.
The inner cells, or the embryonic stem cells, are currently one of the many things that are being heavily researched. Scientists are putting the inner cells in labs and trying to get them to reproduce infinitively, or forever, so that they can use these cells to construct body parts for surgeries. They're used as a resource for human tissue. How does this work? The outer part of the cell from the inner part, which is referred to the ICM. Once the ICM is removed from the cells, the part left the parts that are left are now ES. So now we have the ICM and the ES. The ICMs can be placed into special equipment in labs, and if done properly, they can be used for so much more.
The main cells that help muscles regenerate are called satellite cells. A satellite cell is a type of stem cell. Muscles contain satellite cells. When the muscle is damaged, these satellite cells divide and merge with the existing muscle fibers to regenerate and repair the damaged fibers. The muscle fibers themselves cannot divide, which is why satellite cells are crucial for muscle regeneration. However, muscle fibers do have the ability to lay down new protein and hypertrophy. Hypertrophy is the enlargement of organs or tissues due to an increase in cell size. Sometimes, the damage to a cell is too much to be repaired by the satellite cells. In this case, the fibers are replaced by scar tissue. This process is called fibrosis. Muscle fibers that are replaced with scar tissue cannot perform with the same strength that they could before.
So what do you think affects most people in the United States? The answer is cardiovascular disease. They're diseases related to the heart. For instance, narrowed or blocked vessels, which could lead to heart attacks. If you look on the top left, you can see the picture of a blocked vessel. 30.3 million people were diagnosed as of 2018, and around 655,000 patients die every year. You might be wondering why it is the leading cause of death. It is because heart attacks cause some muscles to die, and it can lead to heart failure, which then leads to death. But advancements in stem cell regeneration can create new tissue which can be injected into the heart, and it can be used to prevent heart failure.
Scientists today are experimenting with using stem cells to repair broken heart tissue. The experiments mainly focus on 3 cells that can be found in the heart. They are cardiomyocytes, the heart muscle cells that beat and are part of the artery and ventricles of the heart, cardiac pacemaker cells, which receive and send the electrical signals to keep the heart beating, and endothelial cells, which are part of the blood vessels and deliver oxygen to the cardiomyocyte cells. Scientists can already grow cardiomyocytes in labs with stem cells taken from the embryo. Something else that is interesting is that following a heart attack in human bodies, heart muscle cells can die, which will result in what we know as heart failure. We can use stem cells to repair and replace the broken heart tissue, which results from the dying heart muscle cells. Once those stem cells are injected into the heart, they will start to create new heart tissue.
Can anyone guess what the next organ is? It looks like this. This is the liver. How important is this organ? Well, let's find out. What is the liver and what does it do? The liver is an organ that's functions include helping with digestion, metabolism, and hormone regulation. In digestion, hepatocytes, which are cells that involve protein synthesizing and storage, produce a yellowish fluid called bile. Bile travels from the liver cells to the gallbladder for storage and concentration. During a meal, the gallbladder releases bile to assist the small intestine with digestion and absorption of fats. Liver is important in metabolism too. It is responsible for breaking down proteins into amino acids and converting them into glucose, fats, and other proteins. Another way the liver is important is by regulating hormone levels and producing hormones such as the thyroid hormone, which modulates the body's metabolic rate. It is also the only organ that has a higher regenerative capacity, meaning it can regrow itself.
So what happens during regeneration? As cells in the liver die, scar tissue develops, the same way that cells do. This scarring process is known as liver cirrhosis. The liver restores any lost mass or weight and modifies its size to fit the size of the organism. It also provides full support for body homeostasis, the state of steady internal physical and chemical conditions inside the body during the entire regenerative process. The time the liver takes to regenerate varies depending on the damage, but in extreme cases, the liver can fully regenerate in 30 days if no problems arise. A type of important cells that aid in the function of the liver are called hepatocytes, and they expand during chronic liver damage. If all major organs, the liver has the highest capacity to regenerate. That's why many liver diseases, including cirrhosis and hepatitis, can often be cured by transplanting a piece of liver from a healthy donor.
How does this help modern healthcare? Well, as long as 25% of the liver remains, the liver can regenerate. The ability to perform liver transplants are also made easier. During a liver transplant, a portion of someone else's liver can be taken and put into someone else's body, and the original person's liver would be able to regenerate, saving lives from liver damage and diseases like liver cancer.
What causes liver damage and failure? Many causes have a negative impact on the liver. Infections like hepatitis viruses, inflammatory viruses that attack the liver, genetics that were passed on, immune system abnormalities, diseases where your immune system attacks your liver, and cancer or other growths are all causes of liver damage and eventually failure. Other factors which depend on how the person lives their lives are also affected on the liver, certain medications, and more. Overall, it's important to note what a big role livers play in the human body and how liver regeneration is a fascinating trait that is used to save lives every day.
Some fun facts about livers. There's a process called adult-to-adult living donations where a portion of the donor's liver replaces the entire liver of the recipient, and over time, both livers grow into complete organs. But even though this is amazing, this procedure still carries some health risks. Another fun fact about the liver is that it contains 96% of water, which is stored in the cells in the blood of the organ. And lastly, the liver performs over 200 functions in the body.
Now let's move on to bone marrow, which is a soft tissue that fills the center of our bones. There are two types of bone marrow, yellow bone marrow and red bone marrow. Yellow bone marrow stores fats and serves as a source of energy. It also contains mesenchymal stem cells. Red bone marrow have tissue containing hematopoietic stem cells, which are important in creating blood cells. Now let's get into the two types of stem cells. The first type of stem cell is mesenchymal, and it gives rise to stromal lineages that produce fat, cartilage, and bone. The other type is the hematopoietic cell. It gives rise to the two main types of cells, the myeloid and lymphoid, which is the thymus, spleen, and lymph nodes cells lineages. This is a good diagram that shows the relationships between bone marrow, stem cells, and the connective tissue cells, forming the blood cells. But how does stem cell regeneration relate to bone marrow? Are there some kind of transplants you can do?
Bone marrow transplants are also commonly known as stem cell transplants. A bone marrow transplant is a procedure done to replace diseased or damaged bone marrow with healthy blood-forming stem cells. Just like there are two types of bone marrows, there are two types of bone marrow transplants. The first is autologous transplants, auto meaning self, which would mean that these are ones using cells from your own body. The other is allergenic transplants, allo meaning other, and this is using cells from a donor. This diagram shows the process of a bone marrow transplant and how stem cells develop into new and healthier blood cells.
So you're probably thinking, why are bone marrow transplants so useful? Well, they can cure cancers like leukemia and conditions like aplastic and sickle cell anemia. You can replace bone marrow to restore regular function after radiation, fight existing cancers not killed by radiation, and prevent damage from genetic diseases. Although many rely on bone marrow transplants, they're not 100% guaranteed. The survival rate is 70% to 90% if with the matched sibling donor, and 36 to 65% if with unrelated donors. This diagram shows how a bone marrow transplant works between the donor and recipient, striving to reform a healthier immune system.
what is skin? Write in the chat which of these three options you think it is. Skin is the largest organ on your body, and we all have it. It's almost like a layer of armor, except made out of human tissue. There are three layers to it: the epidermis, the outer layer that we see, touch, and wash; the dermis, which contains all our blood vessels and keeps us warm; and the subcutis, also known as the hypodermis, which is the innermost layer where all our fatty tissues are. It has three main purposes: protection, regulation, and sensation. But our skin goes through so much daily between hand washing, scrapes, and overall activities. It needs to regenerate constantly. It regenerates using stem cells. Some types of stem cells are epidermal stem cells, hair follicle stem cells, and finally we have our melanocyte stem cells.
So here are some other applications of stem cells. On the right, you can see that this fish had part of its heart cut off, but it was able to completely regrow its heart. And on the left, you can see that someone's fingertip was cut off, and by using stem cells, they were able to regrow part of their fingertip. Stem cells are really important in medicine because a lot of people who have health issues in organs like the heart, liver, or kidney might need donors, but most of the time, there are more people in need of these organs than there are donors. Many people die waiting for organs because they don't get them in time due to the limited supply. Stem cells allow people to regrow their organs, which can save many lives even when there is a limited supply of donor organs that are available. So some of our upcoming presentations on November 1st from 10 a.m. to 10:40 a.m. we have a presentation on neurology, and we'll go over a variety of topics associated with the brain, including sleep, dreams, and memory. And we'll also talk about diseases that affect the brain, including Alzheimer's and neuroblastoma. And in addition, we'll discuss the severity of diseases in the brain and how neurologists can treat them. And you can find the outline of our fall programming sessions in this document. And so on November 15th, we're going to have a guest speaker from Kaiser. Her name is Dr. Manal Alcara, and she's a family doctor at Kaiser. And she grew up in San Francisco and attended Lowell High School. And so she's happy to answer any questions that you may have for her. So feel free to submit your questions in this form. So thank you for watching, and all of the links that were mentioned in this recording will be in the description.